We are going to get started. Good evening and welcome. I am Bill Brown, the Director of New Faith Expressions, and with my colleague, Reverend Dr. Rodney Smothers, our Director of Leadership and Congregational Development, we are excited to present once again our Training Tuesday. Tonight we have an august team who is gathered with us tonight to go over our administrative year in review. We have three of our district administrators, Christine Taylor and Tonia Bennett and John Gauthier, who will be guiding us. We have one of our, is it a business analyst, Dave Schoeller?
That is correct.
Titles are wonderful. Our Comptroller, Pier McPayten, is with us as well, and our Treasurer and CFO, Paul Eichelberger. So it's a joy as they will be guiding us tonight, but we always like to open with a word of prayer. So if you would pray with me, please. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on us. We give you thanks for the specialized ministry of administration, and for those in our annual conference and in our churches who guide us through that throughout the year. So as we learn tonight, open us to new possibilities and new understandings. Guide us as we work through what could be complex data and issue, and remind us, oh God, that all of it is about building your kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Just for those who will ask, this is being recorded tonight, so it will be available later this week on the conference website. And if you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature that you can find on your Zoom control panel. And without further ado, I will turn it over to you, John.
Greetings, friends, and thank you for joining us for the Administrative Year in Review, where we're going to talk about everything finance and administration in the life of a church over a year. We're going to start out with Christine Taylor from the Baltimore Metropolitan District, and let me pop our presentation up here real quick and let her get started.
Right. Thank you, John. Good evening, all. I'm going to kindly ask you to take a brief journey with me as I review the 4 quarters of the conference's administrative year. We begin the year in appointment season. This is a season where the bishop appoints and/or assigns ordained elders, provisional elders, associate members, local pastors, and others called to ministry to fields of labor. It is important to note that although it officially begins in January, the preparation for appointment season really begins in church conference season and the evaluation and advisory period. The following reports are critical to the appointment season. The congregational profile, which is one of the many required reports due at the time of church conference. Pastoral Ministry Evaluation and SPRC Appointment Advisory Report, which is completed by the SPRC Committee and due December 1st. The Pastor Self-Evaluation and Appointment Advisory Report, which is completed by the pastor and also due December 1st. And finally, the Itineracy Form, which is also due December 1st. We move forward with statistical reports, which are typically due the 3rd week in January and is submitted via Ezra. Churches will begin to have access to input data on January 1st. Part of the stat report process includes a verification survey. So churches should be on the lookout for a verification survey email in the weeks following their submission. It is an opportunity for churches to take one final look at the data that determines the church's mission share obligation for the next calendar year. Please complete the survey even if the data is correct. Also in the 1st quarter, you can look for the following: a spring lay servant academy hosted by the BWC districts or regions will be held for those needing classes to become a certified lay or seeking to maintain their certification. And finally, we have ROC, which is the conference's annual youth retreat held in February. The 2nd quarter includes the following events: the Clergy Transition Workshop. This workshop is required for all clergy who have received a new appointment or assignment. Additionally, district offices will hold pastor and SPRC church leadership transition workshop. This workshop is required for all clergy and churches who have received a new appointment. Our final second quarter event is annual conference, which is typically held towards the end of May. Additionally, the following reports are due in the second quarter. The fund balance report is due June 30th. Our finance team will talk more about this report in the upcoming segment. However, we want to make sure that churches are aware that the report will now be submitted via Arena. Churches should no longer email them to their respective district administrator. Finally, for those interested in becoming a certified lay minister, should be aware that the application process should be completed and submitted no later than July 1st. Moving on to the second half of our year, our third quarter entails the following. July 1st, all clergy who have received new appointments or assignments will begin their ministry work at their new church. Also in July, church conference forms will become accessible to churches, certified laity, and church leaders. We encourage churches to begin their work sooner rather than later in preparing the required reports. In support of church conference, the district administrators will facilitate a church conference training Tuesday workshop in August. Additionally, for districts who opt to, they may offer a fall lay servant academy. And finally, on to our fourth quarter. Church conferences are to take place September through November. Please note that church conference reports are due between mid-September and the start of October. So be on the lookout for the conference-wide report submission deadline. Be reminded that the congregational profile is due at this time and is a critical report for the appointment season. In preparation for the statistical report submission in January, a statistical report training Tuesday workshop will be held in December. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, the following reports are all due December 1st and are key reports for the upcoming appointment season. The Pastoral Ministry Evaluation and SPRC Appointment Advisory Report, and the Pastor Self-Evaluation and Appointment Advisory Report. Additionally, the itinerancy form is to be submitted by all clergy whose status is one of the following: full elders who have yet to retire, provisional elders, full or provisional elders on loan, and associate members. We encourage you to plan ahead and begin the work on all reports well in advance of their due date to ensure an on-time submission. I thank you for accompanying me on this brief administrative year in review. This concludes my time with you for the evening. And I'm going to turn it over to Tonia.
Thank you, Christine. Now I'm going to walk you through our website. Our website is bwcumc.org. I'm going to start at the top of the page, work my way down, and then walk through it. At the top of the page, you will see that we have Arena. Here's where you will go to complete church conference forms, evaluation forms, fund balance reports, and more. Next, you'll see the church payments portal. Here you'll pay mission shares and gifts if you have some. Next is church locator, and then the search button to search our website. As you go down, you will see that we have a carousel with the latest news and updates, along with the circles, the red circles, to take you to the racial justice page, our events page, our calendar, and our COVID-19 page. On the carousel, you can click the arrows, which will take you through the carousel so you can find what you would like to read or catch up on. As you scroll down, there are more news articles, recent news. There's also a more news button should you like to read more and look for more. As you go further, you will see events. Today's Training Tuesday is on here, and then tomorrow we have We Rise United prayer call. This is updated, so always feel free to come back. And then as you scroll down a little further, you have the Bible study. Oh, yeah, and you can click the full calendar. Yeah, the Bible study of Who Are We? And then you have our address and contact information and employment information. As we go back to the top of the page, we're going to look at our options at the top, and we're going to hover over About. As we go to About, you'll see information about the Bishop's Office and Bishop Easterling. The Church Conference Leader Directory, if we click on here, here's where you'll find our leaders at the conference level and their contact information. You have the Move Coordinator. You have the Volunteer and Mission Coordinator. And if you scroll to the top, right there, and down a little bit, you have the Leadership Report, and you have a Connect the Dots PDF. That's a good document to go and check out one day when you have the time. Next, if we hover over About, you will see Global Partnerships, History and Archives, the Staff Directory, United Methodist Beliefs, 2020 Delegation. And then if you want to see the districts, we go up to How We Are Organized. You'll go over to the side and click Districts and Regions. Here's where you'll find all the districts and the regions. If you don't know your district, but you have a general idea of your region, you can click on that and it will give you district options. As you scroll down, we're going to look at districts at a glance, and we're going to look at Central Maryland.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And then, so Central Maryland at a glance, you can see that they have how many churches they have, average worship attendance, number of people in mission, the district superintendent, the district administrator, district news, district events. Again, you can view the full calendar on our website. And then if you go down a little further, you will see their district leaders, their lay leader, their DCOM chair, building and locations chair. And this is where you'll find all the information. If you're looking for somebody to contact on your district, visit the district page. Okay, next we're going to look at ministries. We're going to lightly go over the ministries area, but I really encourage you to go through each one of these and dive deeper into each section. There is a lot of information to be found here. If you look at advocacy and action, we're just going to go kind of down the side. You'll see racial justice, creation care, disability ministry, tools and resources, leadership development would be the next option. And you'll find laity development. That's where you'll go for lay servant classes. You'll find out the difference between certified lay servant, certified lay speaker, certified lay minister. And then you have clergy development. That's where you'll go for information should you want to look at the tracks and the options, or look at Boom information or Wesley information. Multicultural ministry. You have deaf ministry, African American ministry, Korean ministry. New faith expressions, missional innovation and congregational development and church planting, wellness and missions. There's so much information here. You really should go through and check everything out under the entire ministries piece. Seeds of security, young people's ministry, youth ministry, young adult ministry, campus ministry. And then you have the United Methodist Men and the United Methodist Women. Again, spend some time here and check it out. Next is news. Under news, we have 2021 appointments. If you click here, you will see the appointments that have been made so far this year, the pastors who have been moved, their new appointments, where they're going, where they came from, and who is retiring. Next, under news, you'll see district news. Again, that's what we were looking at earlier. And news stories. You have viewpoints, whereabouts. If you click on news stories, there's other information under there as well. Alphabetical listing for online worship, annual conference guidelines for resolutions. There's a lot of good information under there if you click news. Also under news, we have Connection. There's actually PDFs of past connections on there from, I think, 2013 to 2020. So you can look at that information. You can also sign up and request a subscription. Next is submit and subscribe. So there's an e-connection that comes out every week to your email, e-newsletter. It includes stories, prayers, news, updates, classifieds. It's a great way to get information about what's going on in the denomination and the Baltimore-Washington Conference. So if you don't receive that, that would be a good place to go. Again, it's news and subscribe. You would put in your information down here. You would click if you want the e-connection, the UM connection. There is a fee, $15 a year for the UM connection, or if you want both, and then you would hit the subscribe button. It's definitely worth subscribing to. Next would be events. Under events, you have the 2021 annual conference information. I believe that just went out in the e-connection this past week. You also have the calendar. If we were to click on the calendar, you'll have information for everything that's coming up that is currently on the calendar. So if you see something on this calendar you want to register for, you can click on that item and then just click register and register for that class. Or some of them may just have a link that you can just go and attend. Also under events, you have the Rock Youth Retreat and Training Tuesdays, which is where we are today, and information on the Connect Leadership Summits. And next is administration. Under administration, you have benefits. So if we were to click on the benefits area, you would have health insurance, pension information, retired clergy benefits. There's also contact information. Should you have these benefits with the BWC, or should you be interested in them, you can contact Francis Tago or Karen Conroy, who are in our benefits office, and they can help you. Next, under administration, we have church conference forms. We have conference policies and procedures, finance, local church resources, and ministry relationships. We're going to go to Dave so that Dave can show us the stat reports.
Thanks, Tonia. So good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Dave Schoeller, and I work in the Finance and Administration Department of our conference as our Business Data Analyst. One of my duties at the conference is to process the data from our annual statistical reports. As most of you are aware, the United Methodist Church requires that all churches report their key statistics each year. And those statistics are first collected by their respective annual conferences. And then those statistics are reported by the annual conferences up to the denomination. And specifically, it's GCFA, which is the administrative branch of the denomination. Our statistics, well, we are just wrapping up our collection and verification of the 2020 statistics. As you know, 2020 presented some challenges. We are typically wrapping up collection of statistics by the end of January, but for 2020, the deadline was extended to early March. And our 2020 statistics also had some changes, as you know, as we needed to report our worship attendance differently in 2020 with COVID. And we also had some new guidance in reporting the income and any possible debt associated with PPP grants and any other COVID relief. So that said, tonight I'll be focusing on the statistical reporting resources that are available on our website. And these resources can be reached by first going to our homepage. You will then navigate to the administration link in the middle of the page. You'll drop down to finance and then over to forms and reports. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see right in the middle of the page is the link for statistical reporting. And at the top of the page, we have two key pieces of information. First is the link to where these statistics are reported. Our conference, like about 2/3 of the conferences now, we utilize the statistical collection site that is hosted by the denomination, and that is called Ezra, for the reporting of statistics and uploading of that information. And second, and most importantly, is a reminder to our members that each year the account credentials are reset. Because there's so much changeover in pastoral leadership and church leadership. Each year we kind of start with a fresh slate as far as account credentials are concerned. So we try to put that right at the top of the page to remind everyone, especially those who may have reported their statistics the prior year, that they're going to need to go in and create new account credentials for the coming year. And to help that process, we have a account setup guide that walks you through the process of setting up a new account and the temporary or starting password and username for each church. So after highlighting those two important issues, the remainder of the page provides basically a chronological walkthrough of the statistical reporting process, along with links that are important at each stage. So up at the top in the prepare section, there's a link to the account setup guide, as I just mentioned. And in addition, there are links to resources that will be important as you prepare to report your statistics. For those, especially those who are new to the process, we will provide links to training sessions, which in a typical year take place in person in early December. As you know, this past year we did everything online via Zoom because of COVID. So we will wait and see what this year brings. But however the training is presented, we will have copies of the training presentation and any documents that were presented during presentation. And we will have that available for you as well. So this section also provides resources to help with some of the more technical areas of the statistical reporting. Some of these I want to highlight include the utility expense calculator, which computes building costs that may be associated with any sort of missional activities. And there's also dedicated resources to help with the reporting of clergy compensation and membership and worship attendance. Those typically generate lots of questions. So we provide resources of our own and also some provided by the denomination. So below that section, the remainder of the page provides key dates and deadlines for the statistical reporting timeline. This includes the date when the Ezra system actually opens up so that you can create a new account for that year for your church. And every year, regardless of our timeline, the actual reporting season usually begins on January 1st. And obviously down towards the bottom there, you will see the all-important statistical reporting deadline for the current year. Again, as I mentioned, this past year, we definitely had a longer time frame for the statistical reporting. So each year, this page is updated typically by mid-November. In advance of those updates, we will generally send out information in early November regarding the training schedule so that you can make plans to attend that training. We definitely encourage, especially if the leader in charge of reporting the statistics is new to the process, we strongly encourage him or her to attend those training sessions. It really helps sort out a lot of common questions and issues that you may have. So that's a quick overview of our statistical reporting resources, and I will send it over to Paul.
Okay, thank you, Dave. We're going to be transitioning soon to Pier is going to cover some details in the fund balance reporting, and I'll be including some of the local church audit guidelines. We'd like to be able to take the opportunity to show you where those resources are on the website as well. So if you're at the home page, we'll navigate to the administration area. And in administration, we'll go down to finance. In finance, we're going to click on finance. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that page, there's a Local Church Resources tab. This is how we enter in where all of this is a page that has a lot of listing of different types of guidelines and applications and different types of tools that are available. So it's kind of two columns. The right-hand column is a column that in a single place, you can understand what we think are the best practices for the internal control of church finances. Gives you a little bit of a list. At the bottom of that right-hand column, it actually has a printout of that page that you can use in any of your leadership meetings, PDF version of the listing. Above that, it also makes reference to the suggested record retention schedules for your church records, all of the financial records, all the different types of financial records and audit records are listed there. And then it also has the Local Church Audit Guide. So that is one location for the Local Church Audit Guide. But I will introduce the left-hand side and show you where it can also be located. So on the top side, we have a little bit of we have some relationships with our conference. With Market USA is the credit union. That is our legacy credit union. Used to be Epworth Credit Union, and now it's Market USA Credit Union. It has a relationship with Clergy and financials. All you have to do is be a member of a Methodist church in order to participate in the Market USA Credit Union. Electronic giving has a tab. The foundation can be found here. If you are looking for making an application to the conference for grants or loans, you can see the link there, and there's also some scholarship information. If we go right below that section where it has reports and trends, reports and trends is where we're going to find the local church fund balance report. This is one of two locations. You can download that in a Word or a PDF or an Excel form at this location. And like I said, Pier will be going through that in a little bit more detail. There is we've taught in several of the webinars, local church trends and forecasts. This is a link that is a tool that we came up with in the finance office that can allow a church to enter in both their financial and attendance data into an Excel spreadsheet, and it prints out graphs to track your trends, and then it actually can be used for forecasting year-end financials, year-end attendance numbers. Those types of things can get forecast. We get on the bottom, there's some items here that get a lot of attention. In this section right here, there's a group ruling online application. I'd like to go ahead and click on that one. This is probably the most often asked question in the conference is, where do I go to print out a group ruling letter that shows that I'm a nonprofit as part of the United Methodist Church? Churches don't have to apply directly to the IRS for being declared a nonprofit. The IRS interacted with just Nashville for the General Counsel on Finance and Administration, gave them a letter of determination, and it is up to Nashville then to determine who qualifies under that IRS determination to be considered a nonprofit. That letter of certification is, you begin an application process here. It's really not an application. What you're going to be doing is printing out your group ruling letter. It takes about 5 minutes. All you need is your tax ID number, your EIN, your church address. Goes in the back and compares some records on different databases. As soon as those come together and identifies who you are, you'll be able to download a PDF and print that and send it to whoever is asking for your group ruling letter. Feel free to ask us if there are any more detailed questions that you have regarding group ruling letters. And the last thing that I would show then is where this side of the sheet has the audit guidelines. It says Local Church Audit Guide. This is actually a link to GCFA guidelines. We'll be teaching this a little bit tonight, at least doing an introduction. This is where we go. There are two major sections to this audit guideline. If we were to scroll down, we'd find Appendix A. Appendix A, and then there's an Appendix B. Appendix A starts probably in around, try 14 there, John. Local church recommended procedures. So Appendix A has procedures for actually conducting a local church audit. And then Appendix B, I think, is on one of those last 3 pages, John, page 19. Appendix B is going to be of interest as well. This is a little bit more straightforward. It's going to be checking on internal controls on a local church audit, and it is simply a checklist. Yes and no, and any remarks that you might have about each one of those questions on a checklist form. And with that introduction, Tonia, I'll turn it back to you. We'll be able to take advantage of some of that information in our teaching and training later today.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, we are going to go back to the website, and then we are going to look at resources. If you hover over resources, you're going to see BWC Ministries, Grants, and Awards. We're going to click on there. If you go down this page, you will see that there are many deadlines for May 15th. Some are July 1, some are June 1, but New Faith Expressions, see all the deadlines say May 15th. I would go down through here, see what grants are available, and what is available to you, your church, your people. Next, we're going to go back to resources, and we're going to go to BWC Policies and Procedures. We're not going to click on there, but that is where you'll find information for rules of annual conference, parsonage standards, expense reimbursements, the sexual ethics policy. All of that can be found under the Policies and Procedures booklet. Catalyst Initiative, that's ongoing now. Church conference forms, here's where you'll find the church conference forms. And then if you go to the left, you'll find the evaluations. Again, as Christine had said earlier, evaluations are due December 1. Church conference forms are due before your church conference takes place. So they're not due at the same time, but that's how you would find the evaluations, by hovering over church conference forms. Next, you have coronavirus resources, and then leadership interest form. On this form, you will, if you're interested in sharing your gifts, skills, and talents and joining a leadership team, you can complete this form. There's also a spiritual gift assessment. And then nominations, somebody from the nominations team, when nominations comes around, may contact you to see if you would be interested in joining a team. And then next we have Mission Insight, definitely worth checking out. That will show you data for around your church. It gives you maps, it gives you all kinds of information. If you were to click on here, it will give you information on how to log into the Mission Insight and give you a link to view the Mission Insight page. And then next is online resources, safe sanctuaries, and again, the Bible study, Who Are We? And that is all I have. So now we will go to Pier.
Well, good evening. As you can see, there's a wealth of information out on the website. Thank you, Tonia and Paul and Christine and Dave for sharing the information. I would suggest, I learned a lot in the presentation. I will suggest, because this is recorded, that you might want to go back and look at this recording and then go back and take some time to go through the website, because there's a lot of useful information. And I think it's well worth your time to actually look at that. But what I am going to go over is the annual fund balance report. This is one of the reports that is required on an annual basis. So the question is, what's included in that fund balance report? The fund balance report is a summary report of all separate bank accounts, including checking, savings, investments, CDs maintained by the church, with using the same tax ID number and affiliated with the church. And who completes the fund balance report? As I mentioned before, the fund balance report is due annually. It's due on June the 30th, and it should be completed by someone other than those persons who are handling the funds. And it should not be completed by those family members. It is not as comprehensive, meaning it's not as much testing or other details as the complete financial audit report that Paul is going to review, but it also is not a substitution for a complete financial audit. But you will have to have access to banking and investment information to actually complete this fund balance report. And a lot of times we throw around that word audit. So what is the purpose of an audit? An official is an official inspection of an individual or organization's accounts, typically by an independent body. Those persons who are not actually handling the funds or doing the work. Audits within church are used to facilitate transparency in the church in financial matters and protect those handling the funds on behalf of the congregation. So an audit protects the person doing or providing the service and also protects the church. This audit report tool also provides an accounting and report to the leadership and members of the church. The annual fund balance report shall be completed after the end of the fiscal year and following the audit or review. Next slide. So the report itself has 2 pages. The first page includes the name of the church. It lists all the accounts. And then the second page is the page where the person checks off whether they were audit or auditing committee. And so I'm going to just go over briefly the parts of the audit report. So the next page shows what you complete at the top. At the top, you're completing the name of the church, you're completing the charge, you're completing the church district, and normally the period is January 1 through December the 31st. The next part of the report is a listing of the accounts. I mentioned before, investments, CD, checking accounts, savings accounts. So you list each particular fund separately, and there are columns A through E. Now, the first column, A, is the balance at the beginning of the year. And I mentioned the word confirm. That meant that at the end of last year, the previous year, you've actually confirmed it, you've reconciled, and you say, hey, this is the balance. So that balance should be in column A. Column B is plus those funds that you received. Column C is minus the monies that were spent. Column D is the transfer. Now, this transfer is between the funds listed on this page. So column D at the bottom should always equal 0. The total should always equal 0. Remember, this is a transfer between the funds that are listed here. So a minus plus a plus is always equal to 0. And column E, of course, is the balance at the end of the year. And the additional areas, it says name. Those, if you want to list, need to list additional funds that the church has or was responsible for. So you total these. A should be total, B should be total, C should be total, D should be total, and all that should equal to the total of E. So that's the first page. The second page is where the item number 2 is where the auditor or the audit committee checks off the box. And what they're saying is they have reviewed the procedures, they've examined the deposits, they've looked at the records and they're proper, and they are confirming that. If there are any exceptions, they are to indicate that in the box. So for example, the records weren't proper, they weren't able to view things, they are to note that in that box. The third are recommendations. As they're observing the processes and procedures, the auditor or the audit committee may have some recommendations. And so they can fill out this blue area. If they have some additional information, they can also attach another page. And this particular page number 2 is then signed off on and dated. on the next page. So to summarize this, the report is to be completed annually and submitted to the district office. Copies should go to the finance chair, the pastor, and leadership, and of course, shared with the church at some point. The report and review should be done by those not performing the recording or the accounting functions or have access to the funds. So there should be internal controls to make sure that does not occur. Should not be completed by the financial secretary or the treasurers or the relatives. Now, the report itself is not only something to be submitted to the conference, it is also a tool to assist the churches and agencies for analyzing the financial health of the church. The form is to be submitted through Shelby Arena website, and Tonia is going to show how that is to be done. This report, when it's being used properly, can assist the church in planning and tracking their spending. It also is a tool to evaluate where your priorities are and the future goals. Where the monies are is going to say these are your priorities, and it's also assist you in changing your priorities or to look at your future goals. It helps determine if finances are in line with the missional objective of the church body. And finally, this is a website that you can use to actually get additional information on the fund balance report. And so if Tonia would be willing to show how the churches can actually submit this form.
Thank you, Pier. Okay, so we are going back to the website, and then we're going to go to the top of the page and we're going to click on Arena. You're going to go to Arena to submit this report. You do not need to email your district administrators or your district superintendents. You can put it in here. We can run a report and see that it was turned in. What we're going to do after going to Arena is we're going to go click here to log in. And you are going to log in. And if you forgot your username or password, you can always look that up. Once you're on this page, you're going to go to the right and you're going to click Fund Balance Report. Once you're here, you can see that 2020 report was already turned in. Or I'm sorry, the 2019 report was turned in 2020. You can always print it and view it. To put in this year's, you'll see the top, it says the Start button. This is for 2020. It says it's not started. The church name you cannot change. If there's a problem there, let us know. Upload report, you're going to go to Change. Choose File. You're going to choose your file. You're going to select Open, and you're going to hit Save. Okay, then you're going to select In Progress or Complete. Since you've uploaded the report, you're done. You're going to hit Complete and then Submit. And there you go, you're done. If you would like to print a copy for any reason, you can do so on the right-hand side. And if you uploaded the wrong report, you can click Edit on the left-hand side. And that's it. You can log out and move on. Thank you. We are going to go to Paul now to discuss the audit.
Okay. Thank you, Pier and Tonia. The last part of our presentation tonight then takes us into doing a local church annual audit. And this is a little bit broader subject, so it's going to build on the fund balance report. And they've done some things within the guidelines for local church annual audits that if you've been doing this for a while at a local church, some of these things might be rather new to you because we've seen changes come in around 2014 and 2017. These guidelines have been updated. So I'll be trying to highlight some of those changes, but these are really, these two documents, the local church audit and the fund balance report, are meant to operate together. That's why we're going to be doing that together tonight. So let's get started, and this is an introductory on local church audits. We've done presentations on this that can go for 2 hours on local church audits alone. So this is going to be just a little bit of an overview, give you a sense of what's in the document. The document's very readable document, so I would encourage you to just get a copy if you're part of, if this is one of your responsibilities of the local church. Printing it out and just reading through it will teach you an awful lot. So we're going to cover tonight what is a local church audit and who can perform that audit. A lot of similarities with what Pier has already said. I will ask you some questions at the end. One of them will be, does the church audit include the trustee funds? Does it include the United Methodist Men, United Methodist Women funds? And then I'll ask you a retention question. How long do we keep our financial records? So we'll look for some of those answers in the presentation. We showed you where to look on the Local Church Resources tab for our Local Church Audit Guide. The link for this is actually kind of hidden down at the bottom with us, John. But it's actually a GCFA link is which we'll find. We were able to see a lot of this information on our tour of the Local Church Resources tabs. The general guidance that's given is just meant to increase the knowledge of auditing principles for local churches. If you're not a CPA, you will understand some of the concepts of auditing that are incorporated in this document. It's really simplified to make sure that anybody who is involved with a local church audit does not have to be a CPA, just needs to be somebody who can a little bit detailed oriented and willing to spend a little bit of time to look through records. And we'll understand why the audit should be conducted by local churches. We looked at Appendix A and Appendix B during our tour of the website. The first one being the Appendix A that goes through the recommended procedures for doing a local church audit. And then there's the checklist for internal controls. That's Appendix B. Let's go to the next slide, John. The guidelines for a church audit are straight out of the Book of Discipline. It's paragraph 258.4D. They made a change to this. The portion that is in red was added in 2016 at the General Conference, and it does speak to some of the significance of the independence that Pier brought out in her fund balance report. But it does say the committee shall make provisions for an annual audit of the financial statements of the local church and all its organizations and accounts. The committee shall make a full and complete report to the annual charge conference. So it's doing the audit and reporting it to the annual charge conference. And they added in 2016, a local church audit is defined as an independent evaluation of financial reports and records and the internal controls of the local church by a qualified person or persons. So let's dig into that a little bit. The overview is that the audit is meant to be a process that provides reasonable assurance that good stewardship is being used in the handling of and accounting for the funds and assets of a local church. For those who are familiar with audit terminology, the reasonable assurance means a lot to how you are testing procedures, how you are watching transactions from the donor to the giving to the plate, to the counting of the process, to the deposits, to the bank account, to the writing of checks to cover expenses. All of those are considered to be transactions that can be viewed and tested within an audit to make sure that they were done in accordance with best practices. So that type of an approach serves several goals. One, by making sure that you're following good practices, it protects it adds a layer of protection for all of your church officers who are working with the funds of the church. For a donor, it is meant to build the trust and confidence that those who are handling the money in the church are doing that in a best practice type of fashion. It also, for those personnel who are involved with the handling of funds, it does bring accountability and transparency of the activities that they have. And it also provides the assurance that if the church is working with restricted gifts, that those are being used properly for restricted gifts is in accordance with what the donor's wishes were when they put a restriction on that gift. And it provides checks and balances for the receipt and expenditure of funds. go to the next slide, John. We'll be able to dig into this purpose a little bit. So it's independently verifies the reports of the treasurer and the financial secretary. So the independence is guaranteed because it's going to be somebody who is not involved with your finance committee. It's not going to be the church treasurer. So we're looking for somebody who is in the church, first of all, good to be part of the church to do the audit, but not involved with those committees. Now, a lot of churches will say that we've really have all of our financial people already involved in the finances of the church. A lot of churches will team up with another church in the area, and they will get the independence necessary by somebody from this church auditing another church that's close by, and somebody from that church coming in and auditing their purpose. That type of independence can be gained by two churches working together. It follows the money and tests how it was treated, documents that donations have been used as stipulated. We talked about that on the last slide. It will review the accounting controls, looking for any types of losses of funds, any types of errors in the calculations. Embezzlement is always something that is a rationale for an audit of any organization, to understand how the accounting practices are preventing that for internal controls, and if it is occurring, to try to test it enough to understand what types of methods might be used. It also, the purpose of this audit, especially that internal controls checklist, looks for the segregation of duties, making sure that one person can't do all of the activities of a church. Having a financial secretary who actually counts the money towards individual donor accounts. That's a financial secretary, not the counter, but the person that actually registers those accounts against independent individuals within the church. Having a church treasurer or a finance committee or a finance chair who's actually writing the checks, separate than the financial secretary. These are all views of segregations of duties so that somebody can't go all the way from start to finish, making a deposit, writing a check, cashing of the check. And it also checks on reasonableness of the systems and procedures based on the church size. So the audit procedure guidelines take into account the fact that smaller churches will have less resources to be able to do a full audit. They might have less number of people to actually conduct an extensive audit. And those are all incorporated into the audit guideline. Let's see some of those details now. So there's a couple of details here on, first of all, on the independence. It's not subject to control. This person would show independence if they did not have any kind of control or influence by anyone who has financial responsibilities in the church, and they are unrelated to anyone who has financial responsibilities in the church. So they want you to select that auditor for the purpose of independence. And then the type of audit will actually depend on the financial constraints of the church. They're going to look at a church's total annual income. So there's two points here. The first and broadest one is that for most of our churches, 500,000 annual income will describe where they fall, less than 500. For those churches, this audit guideline is all that you need to provide the guidance, to meet the guidance of doing an annual audit. So you're selecting an independent qualified member. You're going to do Appendix A and Appendix B in the guidelines. You should include a written report to the Finance Committee within 6 months of the year-end close, and you'll be conducting that annually. In an audit world, a CPA would actually look at these guidelines on Appendix A and Appendix B and think that we're actually doing a review of the organization. A review is just a format of a type of engagement that you would have with a CPA at the end of the year. And a review does provide some assurance that you are following best practices. Now, there is a small note in red on the right-hand side that is there for this guidelines from GCFA speaks to very small congregations, less than 20 members. And they understand that the minimal funding and asset balances are involved. So there's a little bit less risk involved with the finances of the church. And therefore, you don't need to necessarily do as extensive an audit as what's portrayed in the paper guidelines from GCFA. What they say for a church with 20 members or less, they encourage you to complete as much of Appendix A that seems to apply to your church. And you focus on implementing a few of those guidelines that you'll find in Appendix B in the checklist that was used for internal controls. So they're giving you an avenue to be able to talk about how many people do you have to be able to do an audit, what makes sense for the size of the volume of funds that you're processing at your local church. And they're trying to bring a layer of understanding that not every church will have to do the same size audit in order to get the same type of transparency. Now, the next slide allows you to see that if you're in a church that has an annual income greater than 500,000, then their recommendation is that you start to think about doing a professional engagement with a CPA firm or a CPA individual and actually do a generally accepted audit standard full out audit for a $500,000 church. That might be something that's in the neighborhood of about $8,000 to $10,000 for an annual audit CPA. For a larger church that has a lot of different operations, that could be a number that goes as high as $20,000 or $25,000. Oftentimes, I benchmark what it costs the conference to do their annual audit, and we're in about the $50,000 a year range for the level of complexity that we have in an annual conference's financials. But what you're going to hear as you exceed 500,000, they give you 3 breakpoints. And if you're 500 to $1 million in total annual income, you'll think about doing that CPA engaged audit every 3 years. 1 to 2 million, you'll do that every other year. And if you're greater than 2 million, you have enough risk that it's best to do a CPA audit every year. And it really plays out in this type of a table where if you're at that 750, I just wanted to do some examples here. You're in that 1 every 3 years. That means you hire a CPA in year 1. In the off years, when you're not hiring the CPA, you go back to the GCFA guidelines and you do that with a selected independent auditor, doing the paper guidelines outlined in Appendix A and Appendix B, and you'll do that for year 2 and 3, and then come back in for a hired audit in year 4. Okay, we'll see if there are any questions at the end of this. John, let's continue. So when you're conducting the audit, the process falls this way. Pier showed that there is a block on her second page, number 2, that talks about some procedures of what you've looked at and gives you room for making comments about your review process and comments about what your findings are. Those comments can be generated simply by following this local church guideline. And so what you'll see is there usually is a finance and audit committee reviews the prior year's audit. And then with that independent auditor, you'll meet with them and you'll be able to set up a little bit of an engagement. It's a discussion that an audit committee can have with an auditor, letting them know what some of the sensitivities are of that audit committee or finance committee at the local church, and ask the auditor to take special looks at things. If things have changed in the local church, if you've added any kind of accounts, if you've had any major purchases, those can also be identified during that meeting, and those are good to identify. If you had any change in personnel, it's also good to identify at that beginning meeting who has been brought in new into the organization that might be having responsibilities for finances. Church leadership will be responsible for establishing the scope of that audit. During that meeting, the auditor will provide that written report 6 months after the close of their findings. They'll make that report to the charge conference. Here's one of the lookup questions that we'll have. You're going to keep your financial records for 7 years. And the final audit reports are kept permanently for a local church. So those might be two items that are new to you. And working papers may contain confidential information. It's always good to keep those in a secure and safe spot. The groups that are included in this audit, we'll just hit those a little bit. It's all its organizations and accounts. From a standpoint of an audit, we heard this a little bit in the fund balance report. It will include trustees. It will include memorial funds, endowment funds, United Methodist Men, youth, pastor's discretionary, church school. All of those are included in the audit. There is one exception that the GCFA recognizes, and that is that the United Methodist Women, because of the asset distribution that's defined in the Book of Discipline, they really have their own assets and are responsible for conducting their own annual audit for just their assets, for their funds and any other assets that they have. So those funds should still be audited annually. And this guideline from GCFA can be used to provide some guidance to United Methodist Women chapters as well. This is my last slide. We'll complete with just a little bit of the records retention. This is a document that is developed by the General Commission on Archives and History. The link is shown here. It is quite extensive. You'll be hard pressed to find any kind of record, any type of media, social media, any types of records that the church has are pretty much listed in this guideline. I've put some of the ones that are more pertinent to our financial conversation here. Pay records, 5 years, service contracts, 4 years, offering envelopes, 1 year. Those are the types of things we see. And the ones that we really focused on tonight were for the permanent, the audit records, and 7 years for any of those transactions that are being audited as part of your working papers for the audit. And I believe, John, that will complete our work. With some of these questions, we'll simply ask, what is a local church audit? We talked about the Appendix A and the Appendix B. We talked about who can perform that audit. Independence is the key, and you're going to engage a CPA if the church revenue exceeds $500,000 per year. Trustee funds are audited. United Methodist Men are audited. United Methodist Women will perform their own audit. And we talked about the permanent keeping of the final audit reports. And I think that now completes my last slide.
We had one question just asking to repeat the dates for fund balance report and church audit. That should be June 30th for both, correct?
Yes, June 30th for the fund balance report.
Tonight's presentation was kind of timed because that's the next major deadline. It's coming up on us for local churches.
And I think that actually concludes our overall presentation. We just want to extend a huge thank you all for being here. It's difficult for taking an evening out and looking over audits and such. That's the most fun thing we can think of. And I'm glad you could share it with us.
Thank you so much, John. And to Paul and your entire team, if we can stop sharing the screen for a moment so we can see
yes,
everyone's wonderful face. And a question came in since you said there's no more questions, John. Provided that an audit can take up to 6 months and the fund balance is due by June 30th, can there be an extension?
So the fund balance reports are coordinated with the district offices, and we have on occasion had people contact the district office, and as long as you tell them what your situation is, pretty much we're able to extend those, but we do like to keep track of them. So communications is the best part of that.
So let me see if I can pare it back, because every time I listen to this team, I'm getting my mini MBA lesson for the week and the month. The fund balance report is different than the audit, correct?
That is correct.
So I could be doing them simultaneously. One's just going to take longer. I can submit my fund balance by the 30th. And do I submit an audit to anybody outside the local church?
We make, I'll go with the conference standard. So we will make we publish the financial audits in the journal. If we're doing transactions with the bank or with vendors, some grants that we do, all request an audit. And I would think a local church would come across similar experiences of needing to make their audit available. But for the most part, these are provided upon request. And once you understand the true nature of the request, then you can make that public.
And does the fund balance report replace an annual audit? I know you said it, but the question has come up.
It does not replace an annual audit.
So that's kind of the changes, Bill, that have been introduced from 2014 and 2017. GCFA has done best effort to connect the fund balance report to the local church audit. And many people grew up knowing the fund balance report as being the audit, right? And there were no guidelines other than you fill out your balance sheet and that's now considered the audit. All they're telling you now is that on the second page of your fund balance report, when it's talking about the procedures, they want you to look over at Appendix A and Appendix B for those procedures. Sometimes with a professional engagement, it could take 6 months to complete the audit. A lot of local churches will actually time it so that you're getting a lower rate from an audit firm so that you won't be done by the end of June, right? So you might ask for an engagement that's not tied up in the middle of tax season just so that you can get a lower rate on a local church audit. So there's a lot of good reasons why it might be difficult for you to complete the formal audit. In those cases, fund balance report, do your best effort, get the fund balances recorded, and do these, and then you can separate these two in those types of instances.
Thank you, Paul. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to jinx it, John. I don't see questions. Go ahead.
Actually, I wanted to reiterate something that Penny Gaver brought up earlier, just that we're moving, and this is, I think, the second year we've offered this, to entirely have fund balance reports entered through Arena. So you complete the form that's available online and then enter it in the Arena form that is available there, as we demonstrated earlier, and try and avoid mailing them anymore if possible. Keep the record in your church when you're done, when you're completed with it, but also send us that through Arena if possible.
Excellent. Good follow-up. Thank you, John. And thank you all to the entire team. Just a couple of announcements. We now know, thanks to this wonderful presentation, how to submit our fund balances and do our audits. If you join us next week for Training Tuesday, we're doing one on the basics of grant writing so we can report how we spent the money. Next week, you can learn how to get more money. And so Dr. Sherazad Foreman, one of our clergy in our annual conference in the Baltimore Metro District, is going to be providing just a basics one-on-one how to research and write a grant. You can register for next week's Training Tuesday at the conference website under the heading Training Tuesday. Tonia showed you where that's located. And we'll come together again next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And, you know, I don't want to cut anybody off, but we get questions.
This is a good one.
Gina's question?
Yeah.
So in that case, if an audit committee is required to complete the fund balance report, does that mean that we need to have the group set up for that? Is this a separate team from finance?
I would organize it inside of the finance committee to call that the audit committee. And you have to realize, Pier, when you had your second page, you had the choice of either the fund balance report being done by an auditor or an audit committee. Is that right?
That's correct.
So it's not telling you that you need to form an audit committee. Just know that some churches will actually want to do this audit with an audit committee. The Appendix A and Appendix B of the Local Church Guidelines could actually be split up to have 2 or 3 people do a local church audit, so that you're not overtaxing just one person as being the auditor. And so an audit committee concept is also established there to allow you to do that, so that you're conserving your resources a little bit. So just know that the audit committee can be completely, well, let me think about this. So if the audit committee is actually going to do the audit, they need to be completely independent from the finance committee. So let's get that separated. If they're actually doing the audit, get the independence, and they're doing it on their own. And they would be called an audit committee in that instance. The other meaning for audit committee, though, is inside the finance committee, identify 2 or 3 people inside the finance committee, call them the audit committee reporting into finance, and that they're just, those 2 or 3 people are then tasked with receiving the audit from the auditor and being your main point of contact with the auditor, setting up what the engagement, what the expectations are for the audit, selecting the auditor. Those types of tasks is what you would give to an audit committee.
And I really liked your suggestion, Paul. We are a connectional system. And so finding a church that is in your community, a United Methodist Church in your community, and just working together. I've seen it work very well over the years. So wonderful suggestion. For those who did miss it, this presentation is being recorded and will be available later this week, as well as the slide presentation will also be available. You'll find that information on the Training Tuesday section of the conference website. You just scroll down to past webinars. And with no more questions, and with your information so accurate, thank you all so very much. Have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you next week. Good night.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you, friends.
Mhm.